So we'll get into an example here. So I was sitting on a competitive demo a couple weeks ago, and I realized that what I was being shown was a very clean, simple invoice, a single one line item across the top of the invoice. And I thought, well, you know what? That's really what we do. We don't really show real world data. So as I was going through this exercise to try to get some contact data, I realized that it's not really indicative of the real world, right? So this is the kind of table that we would get thrown at, those of us in the industry would like to show, right? Something very simple, standard data, right? It's all the same format. I've got lines in there, which of course Grooper will use those lines to definitely to give us some context, but it's not really representative of what we see in the real world. So the real world looks something more along the lines of this. Right, so I have a variable table where my lines now, I have single and double lines or multiple lines. I have data formatting. My phone numbers are not always in the same format. So I have varying formats, varying lengths of data, and no more lines anymore either. So I can't really make a distinction on I can't use my lines to help me at all. I have no visual representation to help me. So, excuse me. So this is the data that I actually was working with. This is what the table looked like that I had to deal with. So on top of the varying data, the varying formats, I had missing data. So now it's a real challenge in our experience for products to actually really figure out what is a row and what is a column when I have missing data. So this is what Grooper does exceptionally well. So I can pull that data and still keep the context and still understand the format that it was all in. And we'll look at that a little bit in a second here. All right, so here's the document inside of Grooper. This is what we call Grooper Go. It's our web validation client, and we can actually do web scanning and administration in here as well. So I have the image on the right-hand side and all of my table data on the left-hand side here. And you can see that it's all been normalized. So when I look through, which in this case is, I don't really have to worry about normalizing because this document is normalized. So let me move to the next one. So this is our second document where the phone numbers were not all the same, and I've got some varying multi-line data. But notice that the data here, it just adjusts for that multi-line data, right? And anywhere you're seeing it wrap over like this is just because I don't have my fields wide enough. And then my final one with the really difficult data, we're just able to keep that context, and we just know that this data that's an empty field, no big deal. I wanted to point out also here that these are all in the same batch in Grooper. So again, one of Grooper's strengths is that we can keep all this disparate data into the same document type or into the same batch. So I don't have to separate this out for separate batches. I don't have to spend all that time and figure out, oh, this is another one I need to build a new template for. The same rules are applied for all of these documents and can get all of this data regardless of the varying nature of the data. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is data sectioning. So this is probably one of my favorite parts of the product just because of what it allows us to do. So sectioning is simply a way that we can limit the scope and the focus of data extraction. So it allows us to break a document up into subdocuments. And all of the AI and ML algorithms that are out there work better with less data. It's one of those dirty little secrets. So they're trained with large data sets, but when you throw less data at them, they actually are more accurate. And it's just because there's less noise. So sections are great for anything that's repeating. So like an EOB where I have multiple patients on a single EOB, or complex line items that fall outside of what a normal table would be, or like this document here where I have basically different production numbers or groups of data that I need to get, and it's varying in nature. I don't know how many of these I might have. It could be 1, it could be 150. So in previous versions of products, you'd have to code for your worst case scenario. So if you knew that the form potentially supported 10 documents or 10 sections, you'd have to code for every one of those sections, and then you'd have to hide and show and hide things in code. So Grooper just does this automatically with sections. The sections can be 1, it could be multiples, and they will just automatically vary as we find data. So how this works in real life. Here's an example of a document where I don't think we'd be able to get this this line item data without the help of sectioning. So it's a custom document. It has multiple orders in there. So each order has the details of the contents underneath the actual order number. So a traditional table read just won't get this because there's really not columns and rows in a traditional sense, right? So this is a really difficult type of table to get. So I'll show you the headers here a little bit close up. So this is what the headers look like. So this top line of header is actually my headers for the actual order number, and then the rest of this are the fields for kind of deciphering this multi-line table format. So what it looks like in Grooper is this. So this is a 10-page document. So we're simply using that first piece of data, those combination of those pieces of data as our section header or our section break. So what I'm doing is I'm basically, every time I see these three things in a row, I create a new section. And in this case, we have 3 orders across 10 pages. So the first one's pretty straightforward. Notice again that this data in here, this is a multi-line data. This is, again, not simple to do. And then we're also doing a translation from the company or the country that's being put on the document to a standard 2-digit code that would be standard across, in this case, standard across the customs department we're working with. But so when I get to the third document in this, you see that this third document is on the second page, and it goes on for the remaining 10 pages. And if I look at the other pages on here, you'll see there's no header information anymore. We're not able to look at the headers anymore. Not that that matters with this strange header format we have. So this really gives us the ability to, again, if you have challenging data, if you have stuff that you just haven't been able to do with other products, this is exactly why we built Groupers, to get this kind of data very quickly and